Merritt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Great. I'd love to hear about your company, Master of One Coaching.
Absolutely. So I am the founder and creator of Master of One Coaching, which is a leadership and executive coaching practice. And I specialize in scrappy startup founders who are seeking to transform into powerful leaders of purpose-driven movements. So essentially what that means is I'm really specifically looking for that spark in a founder who has a couple of years under her or his belt, are seeing some success, are seeing some opportunity for growth and or experiencing the growth, but are still doing, and it's funny that your podcast is called All the Hats, because I often say that they're wearing all the hats. They're scrubbing the toilets, and they're making the coffee, and they're also doing all the hiring, and they're also doing all the branding, and they're doing all the sales, and they're also vacuuming the floor, right?
That's right.
And so what I work with them on is learning how to evolve into holding the space as a leader, making really sound decisions based in the ethics and values of their business. And as a person with a lot of experience and history in social justice work, my focus is really on the social entrepreneurs who are marrying a for-profit model with purpose-driven work.
What are some of the common challenges that a typical client of yours might be struggling with?
That's a great question. So certainly the all the hats problem. How do I get from feeling like I need to do everything or thinking I need to do everything because I see the need for it, to letting go of some of that and kind of breathing into this new space of leadership? That's the main one. And then from there are so many different facets of that question, right? There is certainly, how do I hire effectively? How do I know who to hire? How do I know how to train them effectively? How do I find the time to create the culture of a business and a company community that I know is going to be sustainable long term, that will do right by the legacy I want to leave? How do I manage all of the overwhelm? Because I think I want to make the coffee because I like that coffee, right? I want to make the sales because I want to make sure that that client understands exactly what they're getting, and I don't know how to communicate to a sales team what it is that I mean, what it is that I really want to deliver. So, and so there are lots of small questions and bigger questions that go along with that sort of umbrella of how do I evolve into this leader. And being a founder is not the same thing as being a leader. It really, there's entirely two different skill sets and entirely two different mindsets. You can certainly do both. And also, by the way, you don't have to do both.
So how, like a founder, usually entrepreneurs that start an idea, they're super passionate about it, of course. And so how do they translate that to their staff and their team? Because it seems that no one is going to love your company as much as the creator. So how do you do that?
Well, it sounds a little cheesy now these days because we talk about the why so much. But I was actually on a call the other night with Ivan Meisner, who is the founder of BNI, Business Networking International. And he talks about, no one's going to care what you know unless they know that you care.
Right.
And it really starts with creating the culture in your business community, the ethos of a business community within the actual business, where you're taking care of your people. That it really has to, Richard Branson talks about that too all the time. You have to take care of your people to let them take care of the business. And that is ultimately your role as the leader of a business. It is not to make the sales. It is to create the environment in which the people who are making the sales believe in what they are selling and what they are offering, and believe that they are also valued in their role in doing so.
What is your opinion on an entrepreneur who is very passionate, but struggles with sales? Speaking of someone I know very well. And then of course the argument is that, really you should improve your skills as a salesperson and promoting your own ideas. But also, is there a time when you should just say, well, I need to hire someone who has that expertise to take that over partially?
So there are many layers to the question you just
Yeah.
asked. Let me see if I can pull it apart a little bit. So as a solopreneur, right? You're just starting out as a founder. There are definitely skills that one needs to hone in order to make those first sales so that you can create some revenue for your business and grow it. And or invest in some way, whether it's, and I don't love the idea of getting loans right when you're starting, because I think there's risk involved that maybe is unnecessary. However, some people need to do that and decide to make that decision, and that's okay. So if you feel like sales is not your thing, then it's really important to invest in yourself and or your business in a way to get that revenue going, because that's going to be the lifeline of a new business. Mm-hmm. You can't do anything else without revenue, right? So
right.
Now, having said that, the next question I would ask is, what about sales is tripping that person up?
Right.
So
is it the fear of rejection or?
Right. And then there's coaching we can do around that. Mm-hmm. So, and there are definitely processes that I have that I can lead a person through, working through their, is it, nervousness? Is it assumptions that I failed before, so I'm going to fail again? What do I need to support me in my next, in my next attempt at selling? What is my mindset around selling? What are the skills that I'm using or not using? How am I approaching it from an energy standpoint? That is to say, what kind of decisions have I already made before I even come to the table? And what kind of decisions do I make after I leave the table? So if is it all my business is based on this one sale? It's not. No matter what it is, it's never that one sale. So, then we need to just kind of work on the approach. We need to work on the skills. We need to work on the mindset, all of it. And, 99 times out of 100, we'll come to the conclusion that the client that I'm working with can at least make some progress there on the sales piece until they can find the time or the resources to bring somebody else in. Now, when I said before about you don't have to be a founder and also the leader. I have clients I have one client I think of in particular who actually inherited the business from his father, and he has tremendous talent in his field. Like, he is an absolute superstar in what he does. He is not the head of the company right now. He's one of 3 or 4 partners, 2 or 3 partners. So he has made that very conscious choice to say, I don't want to be leading everybody because I'm really good at this thing. I'm so good at it.
Right.
And I want to be among the decision makers, but I also need other people in the business to do that with me, because that's not really what I'm best at. What I'm really best at is this one thing that I'm super talented in. And I know that drives revenue more than anything else. So I'm going to bring in other people who can fill in those gaps, and then we can work together. Like I said, you don't have to be the CEO of the company you found. You really don't, unless you want to be. And then, and then we can work on that too.
I know you're very involved with BNI. So what are some of the benefits of being in a supportive networking group like BNI?
Well, right now, especially, right, when we all feel kind of isolated, more than kind of isolated from our communities, and whether it's BNI or whether it's another kind of network, chambers. Certainly, I'm also on the board of my local chamber. I've been involved in other regional chambers. I'm involved in women's groups. I'm involved in entrepreneur groups, and I just stay as active as I can because, well, ultimately, I mean, going back to the sales thing too, people do business with people. They don't do business with products or services. They can get a product or service from lots of places. Why is it you the difference? And you are the difference because of your relationship with that person, whether it's a new relationship or an extended relationship, or maybe it's a referral-based relationship. Somebody else vouches for you. If I have a choice where I can go to 5 different places and get the same service, if I'm going to get a referral from someplace, and say, boy, that dentist is a really, really good dentist, and I really had a great experience with him, I'm going to go to that dentist because somebody I trust said that they were good. And so doing any kind of network is going to help you build that know, like, and trust credibility. And I mean, and that's a big part of sales too, is just, just being credible and being out there and having people associate your service or your product with you.
That's great. Let's switch gears a bit on to productivity. Which app, software, and technology do you rely on most for your personal productivity and the productivity of your team?
That's a great question. So I will say that I'm pretty simple in my productivity. I keep it very simple. I like things to be clean, and I like things to be manageable. I don't like a lot of complex stuff. So I work with Google Suite. It's easy. QuickBooks Online. Trello is my sort of project management go-to. And then with other organizations that I'm in, I've used Slack, which has been helpful, but I try to keep it as simple as possible. And so a lot of the Google Suite, Google Sheets is something that I rely on a lot, because I just don't do a lot of complex work in that way. I just like to keep it very streamlined and easy to manage.
Okay. Besides your occupation, what are some of the other hats you wear?
Oh, well, that's a great question too. So I am, well, let's see. I am a mother of 3 wonderful boys, all adopted, all with some special considerations, developmental and otherwise. And we are a multiracial, multi-ethnic family. So that I have I did before I became their mom, but has definitely increased and deepened my relationship with being an advocate for social justice. That's a big part of my life and my work. I'm a partner in that. My husband and I have been together. We're celebrating our anniversary next week, our 5th anniversary.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. It's very exciting. I am certainly a daughter and a sister and a friend and a community member. Like I said, I'm very involved in several efforts. I like to volunteer my time a lot, even in this virtual realm. What else? A part-time yogi.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah,
well, I'm always
I'm a
curious.
homeowner. I do all these things. So yeah.
Wow. I'm curious about, how do you go about managing all these different hats you wear, different roles? Do you find that you have to change what you're presenting with all these different roles? Are you concentrating on kind of being the same on all your roles? Is there a transition you need to go through for some of them?
I love that question. That's a really great question. And the reason I love that is because I work on that with my clients all the time.
Ah.
So it takes a lot of energy to maintain the personae, multiple personas of being one person at work, one person at home, one person with friends, right? And some of that we can't always help because of just how psychology works. And we slip into roles that we're used to, right? We often do that. Like an example I use a lot is when we go home for the holidays and you're going to slip into the teenage you, because if you left your house when you were a teenager, some part of you is always going to be 18 years old with your parents, right?
Yep.
And there are ways you can work on that, but that, if we're not conscious of that, we can easily slip back into those roles. And also, I think that a major source of overwhelm and stress for people is having to manage these different, quote, personalities, end quote. And one of the things that I work on a lot with my clients is congruence, because it's so much more pleasant to be who you are wherever you are. And I know that I found it to be exhausting when I was going through, I was an actor, and part of being an actor is learning how to be adaptable, but adaptability can have a shadow side in that you're showing up for people the way they want you to show up rather than really who you are. And you start to do some mental and emotional gymnastics around, what do they want me to be? I think especially as young people, we do that. And so I actually just had a great success story with a client recently where it was so awesome. I got to celebrate this with her yesterday because we've been working together about 6 months. She's pivoted from going to a job that she just absolutely, and she was really struggling with this, like very unhappy in her role. Really, she was a leader in the organization, but was banging up against a lot of different struggles and feeling like she wasn't really herself and she didn't really know who she wanted to be. And she had all these different interests, but she felt like they were all kind of just like kind of a step or two away from her. And we've come to this place in the last 6 months where she's decided to start her own business, and she's, not in her job anymore, and she's creating her own business, and she's feeling so excited about it. And she said very casually yesterday, she said, well, I think I'm going to make this decision because it feels most authentic to me. And I went, can you just say that again? Because do you remember 6 months ago when you felt like you didn't even know who you were
Right.
in relationship to your work? And now you're making decisions solely on the criteria that it is authentic to you. Like, that's huge. And it's so fulfilling. It's so fulfilling. So yes, I can't exactly remember the seed of your question, but send me in this tangent.
whether we change between all these different roles.
So yes, we absolutely do change if we're not conscious of it. And it is so much more engaging, and we feel so much more successful when we can actually be who we are wherever we are, truly to ourselves.
Yeah. I love what you're saying about all this. It's also making me think of, maybe it's that we become different shades of ourself.
Sure.
With all these different, but they have to be a shade that you're comfortable with. Like, it sounded like your client was not comfortable with what she had to present as being herself at whatever
Right.
job or with whatever person.
Right.
Interesting.
And so, what I do is based in what's called core energy coaching. And so we look at these 7 levels of energy that show up in leadership. And that's kind of a different version of the question you just asked, which is, how am I showing up in my energy? So this energy, we all experience these levels of energy, and I can go through that.
Well, you know what? I went through that training.
You did?
I didn't get the final, I didn't finish the very end to get the certification part, but I went to the full day training.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Yeah. So you went to the ELT. Yeah. Right. So that's awesome. So be able to understand what is appropriate. I don't mean polite, but what is matching the circumstances and what's most needed in the situation. Right. And that's not the same thing as changing your personality, right? Or having a different face. That's just really just, what do I need to bring up in myself that's going to be most useful right now? And it's a much more intrinsic process, right? Trusting your gut.
Right. That being at that training made me think about how people's responses to what we say, that they're really filtering their experience into what we say, and they're making it part of my reality.
And vice versa. I mean? Yeah.
Like, you could just say, any basic thing, and your intentions are just good, and they could just take it, the wrong way. But that's nothing that you can control. That's from their end. That's their energy take on the situation.
Yep. And we all have those tapes, and tapes is like an antiquated, we all have those playlists. I don't know the modern version of that, but the messages that play in our mind, right, based on our experiences and the programming that we got as kids, and
right. Yeah. Like, for example, sometimes at like the grocery mart or whatever, I'll chit chat with the cashier or something like that, and there was something I was saying something about babysitting my niece, who she was being wise, and she I said, well, you can't jump on the couch anymore, and she says, oh, you're not the boss of me. Which my intention of saying that little story was, just a little kind of light fun, like kids, at that age, but a lot of people I find will go, oh, kids these days, and they're really serious about taking it negatively, and like that it means so much more than, what the original intent was.
Right. That's a perfect example of, everybody has their own version of their reality. Right. Yeah.
Right. Great. I was impressed with your Instagram. I saw pictures of your son at 5:30 in the morning, hitting it at his little desk.
Yeah, so that was my desk.
Oh, wow. He's bumped you up.
He did.
How do you balance that? I often try to get my sons to, to be more organized with, the time management but it always seems to come across as being, nerdy, or like you immediately get the reaction, come on, So how do you want your kid to do that, but in a way that seems they have to be ready to do that. So how do you balance that?
Well, I will come clean and say that was, he was watching YouTube. So he wasn't doing any work.
Yeah. We pulled the curtains back.
That's right. And to be fair, he actually is, being a 6th grader at home, right, is a much different thing than it is being at school. And he has actually done a really good job of making the transition, and not perfect, and he struggles with attention, and he struggles with sitting still, and being distracted by YouTube and various other things, but on the whole, he's made a really good transition to being a sixth grader at home, and he's pretty diligent about his work. So at the same time, just like anybody else, we've got to let them be who they are and get their yayas out, and also remind them that they are in a human body that needs exercise, and it needs to be outside, and those things are hard to remember right now, because I think the tendency is to be sedentary,
right.
especially for kids who are having to be in front of screens all day, and then they my kids' social life is a lot of through their video games, because they can talk to their friends online. And so I don't have the magic answer for that, unfortunately.
Right.
But we
And
just do the best we can.
I think also they're seeing you do things, like they're seeing how you conduct yourself with, getting up early in the B&I meetings, and how you're organized. And I think that stuff, whether they're showing it right in the moment, I can tell that even my sons,
it's always, it gets in, right? It gets in, and they'll, I can still think back to, I actually often cite my experience growing up with my parents. They had a design and build firm growing up. My father was an architect. My mother ran the business and did the interiors. And I just yesterday was on a call with my local chamber. Like I said, I'm on the board there, and we talked about the importance of community, the business community. And I remember going, my parents had an office on the main street of town, and when there was a business that would open up, we would go to the ribbon cutting, or we would go to the little cocktail hour and I was 10 years old, and that's part of my experience. And so I don't think about that every day, but it really has shaped who I am. And so I have hope
That's right.
that they will also pick up on those things too.
That's right. Yep. How do you approach goal setting and goal attainment?
For myself or for clients, or both?
Well, yeah, how about a little of both?
I will say that I'm not as good at setting with myself. That I haven't formalized it as well with myself as I do with my clients. And I actually have my own coach now that we're working on that, because I've done a lot of big idea thinking. And so now we're working on plans to get there. With my clients, we start first on what's driving them to do the work they want to do. And we look at the big vision. Where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years or whatever? Where, I have one client who is 36, and we call him, 46-year-old so-and-so. He hasn't, and we might name him different than his first name. But anyway, we talk about, okay, what does 4 to 6-year-old you want from you right in this moment? Because it helps to reverse engineer the plan, right? It also helps to listen to that instinct. It connects that version of myself that's in the future. It connects that person with my intuition, how I want to make decisions, and what would feel best to me as the client, to what path would feel best to me. So I can make decisions thinking backwards instead of forwards, as if I already have the knowledge and I'm coming back and I'm looking the other way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, holding him in that space.
Yeah.
I often find people that are a little bit confused with, what a life coach is compared to, they might just say, well, I've got a best friend I talk to all the time. So what would be the difference between having a best friend that you talk to, or a good friend, and a coach who is trained?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So coaching came from the sports and from the arts, right? And when we're looking at athletes, especially elite athletes, they're not going to their best friend to say, how can I run faster? How can I handle my breathing more effectively? How can I get the extra, 10th or 20th of a second in the race? Or, I was a gymnast as a kid, so I watched gymnastics a lot still. And, they're going to their coaches not because they need to learn the skills. They certainly do need to learn the skills, but they're going to their gym 8, 10, 12 hours a day and working with a coach at least half that time, so that they can fine tune. They can become that much more elegant, that much more precise, that much more effective, that much more reliable. So when they're under pressure, their skills are there for them. And that outside eye of a coach is not just to be your best buddy, or even to be a sounding board necessarily. It's really to hold your goals and your vision for what you believe is the most excellent version of yourself, and then your business. In my case, it's leadership and executive. So I'm looking at high performing people who want to be even more high performing and more reliable in their high performance, right? So there is my friend has a daughter in the service, and she told me recently about this, this idea of we don't rise to the occasion, we sink to the level of our training.
Right.
And what a coach does is keep you trained up, in your excellence, in your sound decision making, in your managing of yourself, in your managing of others around you, in your maneuvering through your daily life, your work life, and your personal life too. Because hopefully it's the same. Like I said, the same person isn't walking through every door, right? So.
So when you meet with an individual, what are some of the possible things you might talk about in the first few meetings?
Well, it depends on the person, certainly.
Yep.
The very first thing I do is I walk them through the ELI, so you have familiarity with that. For those of you who don't know, the Energy Leadership Index is an assessment that each of my clients take, and I'm certified in that assessment. And it's not a personality test, but rather it's a snapshot of where you are as a leader today and where you'd like to go, how you'd like to grow in your leadership abilities. There is no one set of skills for a leader. Anybody can be a leader who wants to be, so long as they're committed to it and they want to grow. And so what that assessment does is looks at what you're bringing to the table and then how you'd like to develop. And so all of my clients start there. And then that gives us a foundation from which we can build your coaching agreement program. And it usually tells us things like, I'm really good at showing up in a service capacity, but I tend to get overwhelmed a lot. And when I do that, then I tend to shut down. Or I'm really good at collaborating, but I get very frustrated if the other person doesn't hold up their end of the bargain. And so I don't know. And then when that happens, then I kind of lose my steam and I let it go. Or I know I have bigger ideas, but I tend to be hesitant and afraid to really push myself out of my comfort zone. So that's, those are kinds of things that people are asking to work on. They're all, and sometimes that it takes a while to get to the essence of those questions. Mm-hmm. It often shows up in having a hard time communicating with my staff. I have a staff of experts and they should be firing all cylinders and they're not. And I don't know how to get them to do that. It usually comes down to a more personal, something internal.
Is it usually difficulties and struggles that people are coming up with in the sessions? They're probably focused on what's preventing them, right?
Right. Well, what they're coming to me initially with is I have a vision and I want to enact it. Mm-hmm. And then the next question is, what's keeping you from enacting it?
Right.
So the better we get together identifying those things, the better we can get at moving through them and building skills around moving through them.
Some of our listeners are also coaches. And I noticed that you have the accreditation of ACC, Associate Certified Coach, mm-hmm. for the ICF, which is the mm-hmm. International Coaching Federation. What was required for you to get that certification, the ACC Associate Certified Coach?
Oh boy, you're gonna test my memory here.
And really, I'm just kind of saying, was it worth pursuing? For getting more opportunities and jobs, and I'm hearing that corporations want to see that the ICF certification, or at least the ACC.
Yeah, 100%. It absolutely is worth pursuing. It not only because I felt like it was what corporations are looking for, and people are getting more savvy now that they're understanding, being able to discern more specifically what they're looking for and what it means to be an accredited coach. But also for me, I wanted to make sure that my skills were sound, and that just like what a coach does for a client and keeping their excellence finely tuned, I wanted to make sure that I was doing that for myself too. Mm-hmm. And so it allows not only for me to say, I have the certification and I have the skills that you need, but I also know that I have the continuing education units that I have to make up. So I'm keeping on top of the what's happening in the industry. And furthermore, there's a lot of what I'll refer to as chatter about, licensure down the road. And I actually initially pursued a career after my acting, and then I kind of went through nonprofits, and I went for a while down the road of mental health counseling. And I didn't finish that degree for personal reasons, but I got to be a part of the accreditation program for the program that I was in, and they have a top tier accreditation program that I got to be on the panel for, and it was really fun. And what I learned from that is that licensing is quite an ordeal. And also, I live in New York State, and if we can create more red tape to go through, by golly, we're going to do it in New York State. So if and when licensure becomes an inevitability, and as lobbying for coaches grows, and eventually people would like to maybe put it on insurance or some other, make it even more of a thing that people can access more readily and maybe more financially accessible, etc. Licensure is going to become more of a demand according to what the sort of industry trends are. So being an ICF certified coach streamlines that process, because they're the ones that are going to be at the forefront of that.
Because I think the general public also can consider sometimes life coach or any kind of coach as being, oh, well, I'm a coach too. Like we're all, they don't see that those skills and those requirements that are put in that make that difference.
Right.
Between someone who's just listening to someone else and someone who has honed those skills.
Right. I mean, if you think about it in terms of social workers have been around for 100 plus years, right? More than that. And then we had psychiatrists, and then there was psychologists, and psychiatrists didn't like psychologists at first because it took away the medical model of it. And then we had counselors and social workers and counselors and therapists, so all these differentiators. And for a long time, counseling wasn't licensed either. And then that became a thing because it was, it became its own kind of industry, like pocket industry in within the greater therapeutic umbrella. And I think the same thing's going to happen with coaching too.
Let's switch gears to speaking. You're also a speaker. And can you tell us about your program, Choose Well, Choose Wisely, Choose Love?
Sure. So what I will tell you is that that's the foundation of that is in my personal story. And so if I may share a little bit of that story.
Of course.
All right, great. So the story goes that as I mentioned before, I grew up as a performer from a very young age. And I started from the age of 3. And I was also a local competitive gymnast. And so I had a lot of performing going on in my life. And I followed that through all the way through college. I moved from Northern California, to where I was born and raised, to New York City to go to attend NYU college. Graduated when I was 20 as a professional actor, right, ready to go, and found quite readily that though I loved the collaborative process, I loved creating with peers, I loved the sense of inspiration and telling stories and connecting with audiences, and all of that I really enjoyed, and the industry was just not a great fit for me. I had some difficult experiences, and I just thought, I just don't think this is the right industry for me to be in. But I didn't know what else to do because I didn't do anything else. I started so early, and this is all I knew how to do. So I had a mentor when I was working at an off-Broadway theater called the American Place Theater in Times Square of New York. And I had a mentor who was running the education department there. His name was Paul Fontana. And he said, "Hey, have you ever thought of teaching?" And I was like, maybe. I like working with kids. And he gave me the opportunity to become a teaching artist. And so I started really diving deeply into that world of becoming a teaching artist. And that slowly helped me identify this passion for using these creative outlets and mechanisms and interventions to help young people first, and then ultimately adults later, to cultivate their voices, their sense of self, and dream of a life for themselves that they didn't necessarily think of as possible before they had come into contact with these practices. And I guess I started out working with what was termed as at-risk populations, and I followed that for a while. And I moved to Seattle with my husband Peter, who got married in 2000, and did arts and theater outreach there, and kind of toured all over the country doing leadership development through, but it didn't call it that at the time. It was really doing arts intervention work. And then through a series of circumstances, found myself back in my hometown working for actually my own high school. And I was in the student services department as assistant dean of students. And so there I was doing academic advising, and then actually officially leadership development, student government, working with the student leaders to develop their goals and programs for the year, their academic achievements, working with their families to help them kind of walk them through their secondary education process and into college and beyond. And I really just was getting more and more focused on this leadership development piece. I was like, wow, this is really interesting to me. Like, what makes a leader? What makes them effective? What makes them passionate? So my first child was born about when I was in that job, and all three of my children are adopted, as I may have mentioned. And my mother got remarried and moved back to her home state of Texas, and my father decided to move to Portugal. And so we were left without any family support in the town we were in, so we decided to go to Buffalo, which is where Peter's family was. Peter's family is a big family, very dynamic, very connected. We had Sunday dinners and happy, birthdays together and all that. So we became very much part of this community in Buffalo. And while I was there, I got to work for an organization called the National Federation for Just Communities. And that is what I'm going to call a social justice organization, really looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, and human services through that lens. And so I jumped right in with becoming a facilitator for kids programs. And then it really became officially this leadership development piece, and transitioned not just from kids, but also into higher education for college students, corporate lawyers, schools and districts, working with teachers and administrators, working with the sheriff's department, elected officials, the federal government, you name it, we got to work with them. And that sort of evolved over time. In the middle of all of that, and I also went into school to get my master's in mental health counseling. And also, in the middle of all of that, our twin boys were placed with us through the foster care system, and they had a high level of need, as I mentioned. And so our life became very, very complicated very quickly.
Right.
A year into that process, my husband, Peter, was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. Mm. And so we went through that process of him going through chemo and radiation and ultimately deteriorating. And he passed away a year and change after his diagnosis. And the night he died, I got an email from a colleague and friend who was also helping Peter through his care process. And she had the last words that he ever wrote for me. And it was 2 a.m. and I was sitting on the cold linoleum floor of my sister-in-law's kitchen, where he had collapsed. And the words on the email were: choose well, choose wisely, choose love. And I didn't know what to do with that information at the time. I sort of shook my fist at the heavens, and I was like, what do you mean?
Right.
I didn't really know what to do. 2 weeks later, I finalized the adoption of my twins. And it took about a year to really figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I needed to move somewhere else. I needed to kind of restart our life as a foursome. And so I found the Hudson Valley and fell in love with it, and found myself a house. And there are other parts of the story, but suffice it to say, I got them situated in the Hudson Valley, in their schools and with the right supports, and got a part-time job working for a theater, going way back when, due to my kind of roots, because that's what I knew how to do. And then moved to another nonprofit, arts-based nonprofit. And then during all that time, I met my husband, Tom, and he has his own story of hitting his own bottom and redemption. And we recognized that in each other. And so we hitched our wagons together, and we decided to, create our family together in this new place. And so we did that. We bought a house. We got everything, he adopted the children. And in that moment where things kind of felt like they were, all right, everything's normalized and stable, I remembered those words. What does it mean to choose well, choose wisely, choose love for me in a professional capacity? Because I'd never felt like I had found the quite right thing. Like I was always close, but not quite right. So I looked way back into my performance history. I looked back at creative collaboration. I looked back at helping people feel empowered and envisioning new futures for themselves. I looked at teaching, loving working one-on-one with people, doing coaching for actors and in auditions and being a director. Certainly the social justice piece, the facilitation piece, and this leadership development piece. And it all kind of came into this one moment where I did all this research and found the word coach, which I didn't even know was a thing. And I found it. I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I do. I do that.
Right.
And so I was using those 6 words as, please let this help me navigate so that I will know it when I see it. And I just kept repeating that to myself: choose wise, choose well, choose wise, choose love. And so I then found IPEC, which now you know, and just let that mantra lead me, and so I could feel it when I walked into the room my first day of training. I could feel it when I made the decision to be a coach. I could feel it when I first got my first client. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm born to do this. And who knew? And that's still how I conduct myself. If I'm with a prospective client and I don't feel like this is choosing well, choosing wisely, and choosing love for them or for me or for me, it's not the right fit. And so that it really is how I navigate my whole life.
Right. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It seems like it doesn't always happen so clearly as it did for you, but it did.
Well, I would say I'm a storyteller, so remember that.
Yeah,
I have fine-tuned that story so that it can be concise in the telling.
Right.
There's certainly more tributaries to that river.
You actors always have a little step ahead, that secret sauce,
That's right.
It's almost not fair. Well, we're almost at the end here. This has been such a pleasure. What's a hobby you enjoy that most people may be surprised about?
I picked up knitting a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And that's not something I ever did before, but back to the Mets. When I met my husband, he can't even believe he actually said this to me when we met, but he said, sports aren't that important to me. It's okay. I don't need to watch all the games. We watch a lot of Mets games.
Yeah.
And, I like baseball. I like sports. I have nothing against it, but I don't have a passion for it like he does. So I thought, well, I can either not see my husband for 162 games or how many ever it is, or I can sit there next to him and do something that's going to keep me occupied. So I learned how to knit. And
that's great.
And so I enjoy it. It keeps me sane. It's good for the brain. It's good for the, hand-eye coordination. Keeps me creative.
Merritt, where can we go for more information about you and what you do?
So I have a website up now. It is being revamped. And so the new one will be launched in a couple of weeks. I'm very excited, but it's going to be the same URL. So you can go there now and see, how to get a hold of me. It's masterofonecoaching.com. All spelled out. One is the word one. masterofonecoaching.com. You can also get to me on Instagram at Master of One Coaching, and on Facebook at Master of One Coaching, and LinkedIn I'm under my name, Merritt Minnemeyer. And you go ahead up to my website and join my newsletter. I send out 1 email a week. I promise. It's very unusual if I send more than 1 a week. And just keeping in touch with people who want inspiration around leadership and social entrepreneurship.
Beautiful.
And those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
My final question is, what's one action step our listeners can take to lead a more fulfilling life?
Ooh. I like that question. One action step. There's so many answers I have to that. I will say this. What I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, especially, definitely in the last 6 months and change, in the last 2 weeks especially, I've noticed a significant uptick in stress reactions from my clients and also myself. And I actually had a post about this yesterday. So when we feel overwhelmed, what neuroscience tells us is that if we practice focusing on the things that make us feel bad, we will continue to feel bad. If we practice focusing on the things that make us feel better, we will start to feel better. And I actually had to be reminded of that from my best girlfriends over the weekend. They're like, remember what you say. So very quick and easy thing to do when you're starting to feel overwhelmed, and to get you kind of right your ship if you need some a little bit of positive energy in your life, in that moment is go through a list of 5 things, at least 5 things, you can do more, that are going well for you. It can be super small. And I actually did this when I was first widowed as well. I would find the smallest things just to make me feel better. If it was like I love the color of that flower, or that my children's laugh, so I did the same thing then that I did yesterday, which was, my husband made chocolate chip cookies, and my kids are healthy, and my business is going well, and it's a beautiful fall day, and my dogs are cute. Like, that was it,
Yep.
And it's a really quick thing that you can do to adjust your mindset in a few moments.
That's great. Well, I've really enjoyed this, Merritt. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Scott, for having me. I really appreciate you reaching out, and it's been a pleasure for me as well.
Great. Welcome to the All the Hats We Wear podcast. This show will teach you, the entrepreneur, the time management skills you need to be joyful, productive, and fulfilled. I'm your host, life coach, and productivity expert, Scott Snow. This is episode 47. We have a very special guest. Merritt Minnemeyer is the founder and creator of Master of One Coaching. She is a highly trained educator, facilitator, and performer, and brings over 20 years in business, education, social justice, and the arts to create unique and specifically crafted programs for the benefit of each client. Before discovering coaching as her calling, she graduated with a BFA in acting from NYU Tisch School of the Arts, and later with a master's in humanistic multicultural education from SUNY New Paltz. A published writer, she is an avid live music fan, a voracious devourer of books, a joyful traveler, and calls anywhere near the ocean her happy place. Above all, she enjoys facilitating inspiration and positive change, and is thrilled to support others who are hungry for growth and transformation, and to contribute to the health and wealth of the world. Master of One Coaching is Merritt's dream come true. You're meant to do great things. If you want to be an innovator and visionary, you have to manage your busy life like one. The All the Hats We Wear planner is the planner for the future. I want to give you a free month of the planner to try out for yourself. Nothing will slip through the cracks anymore. When you use the All the Hats We Wear planner, you'll have everything you need at your fingertips. All of your goals, a vision statement, a list of daily habits, and a checklist to track your progress. Key information for the small and large projects on your plate. Daily sheets to clarify your top outcomes for each day. A week at a glance section to plan for the coming weeks. And much more. The All the Hats We Wear planner will be your roadmap to a more joyful, productive, and fulfilling life. To claim your free month so you can see for yourself how it will streamline your busy life, visit allthehatswewear.com.